Welcome to another week of the Expert Talk podcast. This is Leo Jimenez, and I use my role as a CEO at Go4Click to invite training experts from large companies to share their experiences and good practices to inspire others to innovate. Today, we are going to talk with Romy. She's a facilitator of learning experiences, and her work is to make learning events truly experiential, engaging, impactful, and fun. Welcome, Romy, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Leo. I'm very, very thrilled to be here with you today.
Nice. Romy, I am a lover of the psychological safety concept. So you are at the same time an expert of psychological safety. It's not a coincidence, obviously. How can we create safe training in our company?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, what's really encouraging to see is that psychological safety has become now quite a big topic and a big name and a big word that people are using a lot. And I think it's really important that we get granular, as you said, on what are those specific behaviors that bring about safety, because I see far too often people starting off their training. Hello, my name is Romy, and this is a safe space, so feel free to say anything, right? And I always say, don't tell me it's a safe space. Please show me in your behaviors. And even now I see more and more trainers saying, this is not a safe space, it's a brave space, right? We want to even create opportunities that people feel, brave to step out of their comfort zone and their challenge zone. But that's where the real learning occurs, as I know you know. And it's also not something that can be done so quickly or so easily, right? So it requires many different behaviors. So some different things I might say would be, one, as a trainer facilitator, be willing and open to role model vulnerability. Is so important. I cannot, as a trainer, ask my participants to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself, or to share something with each other that I'm not willing to role model in front of a group. And even in the most vulnerable circumstances, if I'm asking people to, go deep in emotional intelligence, I have to be able to talk about my own emotions, to role model that vulnerability. So that creates a space for other people to feel safe to do the same. I'd say starting there, I'd say other opportunities are gradually building vulnerability. I see too many people go straight into these deep, vulnerable, emotional moments with participants. And that also can put people in their panic zone. What did I just get myself into? I wasn't ready for that, right? People need to first warm up. They need to connect. They need to know who's in the room, find their space, and feel a bit comfortable first in the setting, so that then they're able to really put themselves in their stretch zone. And then other aspects of psych safety in general are really the 4 pillars that build psych safety are this open conversation. So being able to talk about anything, but also being able to hold each other accountable, right? Lately, particularly, I'd say, right, when you have those moments in training and people, there's a microaggression or a really discriminatory remark, this is a moment to say, hey, let's call that in. Let's make this a learning opportunity for everyone, instead of saying, oh no, we're just going to, push that comment under the rug and not talk about it, or, even shaming people without creating a space that we're learning and growing together, because that's where real change happens. So open conversation is really important. Willingness to help, creating that supportive environment, also where participants can feel like, hey, I can actually contribute my own ideas and expertise. Inclusion and diversity, people feel that there's diverse people in the room. Also, they can bring their own individual strengths. And last but not least is the attitude to risk and failure. So it's like, how are we, yes, encouraging people to take those risks, but then if people fail or make mistakes, how do we celebrate that and, extract the learning, instead of, again, making people feel shamed or embarrassed that they took those mistakes. So there's so many different things we can do, but those are just a few I would definitely say are the core essence of how to build psych safety.
Interesting. And what happened when our boss is in the room?
When the boss is in the room?
In the room, exactly.
Even more important, right? I always try, when I have clients, I'm always really working with the leaders and trying to help them see, like, this is also a moment for you to show up and say, I don't know, I don't have the answers. I'm also role modeling vulnerability because they also need to set that example for their team, even after I'm far, gone from the workshop space as well.
Exactly. Perfect. And how can we measure the level of psychological safety in our workshop if we are a facilitator?
Yeah, I mean, in an informal way, I'd say checking in with participants, which I know can be harder to do, but really making yourself available. When I get the chance to be with participants, I'm often saying, please come to me with any feedback, right? This open conversation. I often say, I don't care if you tell me you hated this activity, it was terrible, or you say you loved it, but I want your feedback to understand how this experience was for you, so I can better understand how to design and facilitate, meaningful experiences for you. So I think it's about checking in with people, seeing how many participants are actually coming and speaking to me. Are there mechanisms that, maybe if it's, oh, people don't feel safe speaking to me directly, I have like a feedback wall or those kind of things. But really, if, the really cool thing that I think is that you can actually measure psych safety. So Dr. Amy Edmondson, who is, let's say the leading world expert on psychological safety, cannot recommend her books enough. The Fearless Organization, I highly recommend it. But she created even a very simple 7-question survey that you can actually, you can find very widely on the internet. She's been very generous with that. But I also, there's many different mechanisms and tools. I'm certified to actually administer this assessment with the Fearless Organization. And it's really only 7 questions, but it can paint such a great picture for teams to see their level of psych safety. So some of the questions on this survey are like, if I make a mistake on the team, is it held against me? Or am I able to bring up problems and tough issues to the team? Or do people on my team sometimes reject me or reject others for being different? Is it safe to take a risk? Is it difficult to ask people for help? Or are other people also willing to help when they see people need it? Do people try to deliberately undermine or undermine different efforts? And does everyone feel that their own unique skills and talents are actually valued and utilized within a team? So just by asking some of these different questions, you can get a snapshot, and it's so interesting to see these reports. And then data is really great, but then I think it's like what you do with the data, how then you work with teams and saying, okay, where were we lower? Which of these pillar core areas were we lower in? What can we do as a team to really build that up?
Okay. And you're a worldwide facilitator. What is the role of people culture in this topic, psychological safety?
Yeah, such an interesting question. So I have I love this question because traveling is a very core hobby of mine. My life goal is to visit every country in the world. I'm determined to do it. This summer, I just got to country number 81, so I'm very excited about that.
Wow.
Yes, so it's been very interesting to see how psychological safety shows up differently cross-culturally, right? I think what I've seen undeniably is that no matter where you are in the world, psych safety is needed. It's an absolute essential. People need to feel that it's, psychological safety is this environment of rewarded vulnerability. It's in comparison to punished vulnerability. Psychological safety is, right, this shared belief and understanding that people can speak up, ask questions, make mistakes without anyone really, coming back against them or shaming them, or, they won't be punished for it. And so that is a need that we have as human beings to feel safe, not just with, physical safety, but also psychological safety. But how those behaviors show up in different ways, right, across culture. So I can give you an example that I'm working a lot in Central Asia. In that part of the world, in comparison, I'm originally from New York City, but I've called Europe home like the past 12 years. There's let's say, a more widespread cultural attribute about not bringing conflict so forcefully out in the open, right? I also grew up in New York City in an environment where it's like, we need conflict. We need to work through conflict. Don't be ashamed of conflict. Let's talk about it, right? And so I need to be mindful of how the cultural context, yes, psych safety is needed throughout, but remember that pillar I talked about of open conversation is going to look really differently on, whereas when I might be working more in Europe, I might create a space that we can call out the stinky fish as a tool. We can speak out about, again, what's not working in the team. What was a conflict we had? How do we work through it? I might not take that same approach in Central Asia because I've learned also the hard way through making different mistakes of my own, right? That though, we need to create an open environment for conversation, but that willingness to help communication is, much bigger and more emphasized in that part of the world. And it's about finding unique and different ways to address the conflict that doesn't feel so outward, so open, so people don't lose face, right? So people don't actually feel it leads to more shameful behavior than actually safe behavior. So that might be one way. I think just doing as much research as any trainer, should, doing as much research as you can before you go to a country to really try to understand more about the culture, meet different people, be very, very careful of your own assumptions and your own biases that we all have that we're bringing into it. And I'd say learn, it's not always the stance we take as trainers. We're often like jumping in, let's go, we're leading. But I think it's really important to first show up in a culture as an observer and see like, what can I learn and take from this that then I can better lead moving forward in my trainings.
Review your own assumption before any movement out of your control zone, right?
Yeah, totally. I actually, when I first moved to the Republic of Moldova in this consulting and advising organizational capacity, I was there for 2.5 years, actually. I was taught that my first 3 months, no matter how tempted I am to initiate a project or start with something, I was not allowed to do anything. I had 3 months just to observe. And I think I didn't realize then what a gift it was. I was getting so restless of like, I want to do things. I want to start training, right? But it's actually, I need that time to really observe what is the setting, what's the context, what's the culture, so that I can design and deliver better programs. So I think that's a mentality we can take to anything we do. Perfect.
And what lesson did you get as a facilitator?
So many, infinite lessons. I consider myself a lifelong learner. So I think I learn something new as a facilitator every single time I facilitate. Every day I'm working with other facilitators. I think two things come first and foremost to my mind. I'm sure there's just infinite ones, but based on what I was just saying is never feel that you need to be the most knowledgeable person in the room, right? I think we often, especially in the training context, it's like people are there to hear from us. So we need to be front and center. We need to have all the answers. And this is also the stance that many leaders take. I'm the leader. I need to have the answers. And there's something very vulnerable and yet very humbling and very safe when even a facilitator or a trainer or a leader says, "Ooh, I don't know. That's a great question. I actually don't know the answer, but why don't we afterwards in the break, why don't we both go look this up, or I'll research this and come back to you with the information." And it's, oh yeah, you're not there to be the end all be all. When I first started my training career years ago, I was so nervous. Like, I hope nobody asks me a question that I don't know, right? Now I'm like, ooh, that's a great question. I don't know. Let's explore it more. We're going to foster more learning for everyone. So I think remember like to put your participants first. It's not about me and my ego. It's about us and the learning environment. And I think on that same line is also just how do we address this hidden, very oppressive stance that can often happen in education, in the same way of like, I'm the trainer, I'm the facilitator, I'm at the front of the room, I'm guiding the process, I have the power. We often think about people as empty, like, oh, they need to learn something, so they're empty. I need to fill them with information, or this is one directional. You're here to learn, I'm here to teach, here's the path. And I think if there's anything I've learned, Paulo Freire's work in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, super impactful and powerful for me as a facilitator and a trainer to understand, you're familiar, no, with Paulo Freire's work? Yeah, I'm sure. And it's really interesting to understand what are those hidden moments of oppression of how am I seeing every single person in the room as a full and whole human being, just as they are, not empty with information, but every participant brings so much life experience, so many ideas, so much knowledge. And my job is not to, feed people with information so they absorb it. It's to learn from and with the group, to really create that space where everyone feels they can contribute, they can share, and it's a really co-created learning experience. And that's just so important to really both to be as a facilitator, but also to create psych safety.
Exactly. We can build knowledge between us together. Yeah,
Totally.
a collaborative way. Perfect.
Yeah, and actually, just one more thing on that. Again, there's this misconception that the majority of what people learn is from you as the trainer. And actually, the majority of what people remember is often what they hear from their peers. And so we do everyone a disservice when we're not asking more questions instead of telling, when we're not saying, ooh, I want to hear from diverse and different opinions here, because that's actually what people remember most.
Yeah, the key is doing good and powerful question.
Totally.
It's about powerful question. Okay. The last one, if I want to take my first step on that way, where should I start?
I think, start at the beginning. It's very important I see too often this connection, the psych safety, all of the process oriented versus the outcome oriented work of training and facilitation is often the afterthought, right? People often say, oh, okay, we need an icebreaker. We'll just wait and then we'll just throw in an icebreaker. But really, I'm always telling people, let's be really intentional in how you create that learning experience for your participants from beginning to end. Like with anything, how you start really sets the tone. So if you imagine you welcome people into an online workshop, this happens all the time. There's silence in the workshop. People haven't arrived yet. You're sitting there saying, thank you for coming. We're waiting for people to arrive. Thanks for being early, but we're waiting, right? What happens is people get out their phone, they're just waiting. They don't feel respected for their time that they actually did show up. And so how you set the tone at the beginning, okay, with an online workshop, kick it off with an activity, help people connect, even sharing something in the chat with some music. People could go in breakout rooms towards the first 15 minutes of any workshop, even online. So people feel that they're connecting. In an in-person space, it's the same thing. Sometimes I have connection cards on the chairs and there's music. And so people already are not, I used to just start trainings and it was in silence until I kicked it off. And again, that makes it very me-centric. And I learned I need to put the participants at the center. They should be already using those cards, asking each other different questions so that, oh, right, this sends a message. I can show up as I am here. I'm encouraged to interact and engage. Somebody is seeing me. And I think just continuing that thread, I often say to people, you have to go slow you have to go slow to go far, right? And so it's like, let's take the time to build up the safety, to build the connections, to build the group, instead of seeing it as an icebreaker just to do an icebreaker. It's like, how are you really connecting people to each other, to the topic of the meeting, and creating at least choice or space for more vulnerable shares. People can choose how much they want to share or not, but at least creating that time and space, you'll see such better results later in the workshop, because then people say, oh, I can ask this stupid question. Okay, then I can take this risk, or I want to try something out. Whereas if they don't have that at the beginning, they're kind of become these participants that they can't take ownership over their own learning experience. And everybody, everybody misses out in that sense.
Perfect. I want to add, no, I have to. One more important question. Where do you get your energy, the energy that you need to be a good facilitator?
Good good question. I've had lots of talks in the last 2 weeks about our time and our energy are our most valuable resources, right? I'd say for me, I do think that my superpower is my energy. And so this is one of the ways that I think I can show up in the world. I'm very passionate about this topic, right? So this topic in general brings me a lot of energy. And the only reason why I am passionate about psychological safety is because, like so many other people, I know what it's like to work in an environment where it doesn't exist, where it's a very toxic environment, where I don't feel safe, where it affects my everything, your well-being, your mental health, the work outcomes. You know, Google did extensive research to see what was the number one key differentiator for high performing teams. And they found that the number one differentiator was psychological safety. People need to feel safe and that they can be vulnerable, they can take risks. And that's what ultimately is going to lead to the best outcomes. So I get my energy because of, impact is such an important core value to me. I don't do trainings just because, I love learning. That's another core value. But it's also because of impact. I want to be the change I want to see in the world. I want to help other teams cultivate their own psychological safety so they can really lead to their best results, so they feel mentally and physically well as in the workplace. And it's the core. I love to go deep into experiential learning, but I've found that I found that psychological safety is the foundation. We have to start there to then be able to actually design and deliver truly experiential programs. So that's a bit about where I get my energy and fuel from.
Perfect. Romy, thank you very much for your generosity. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much. Y lo siento muchísimo que hoy no hemos hablado en español, pero creo que la próxima vez, cuando yo tengo más confianza, sí, voy a hablar contigo y voy a practicar.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti, gracias a vosotros. Chao.